The NFL draft is less than 2 weeks away, and that means it's the perfect time to go through another mock draft. I'm going to take you through my top 10 predicted picks. There will be trades, and where will the quarterbacks go? You'll have to watch to find out. Pick number one, we know exactly what pick number one's going to be. It's going to be Caleb Williams from USC. He's a fantastic prospect. He's going to be the first quarterback off the draft in most of your fantasy drafts as well. I expect that in a Superflex league, he's going to be the first guy off the board as well. Now, after Caleb Williams, that's where things get interesting. We've got a couple of options. It could be Jaden Daniels, it could be Drake May, or it could even be JJ McCarthy. And it's not really clear exactly who we're expecting at this point in time. I think it's probably going to be Daniels, and the bookmakers are shifting towards Daniels a lot more as well. He's more mobile. He's more careful with the ball. I think he's also ready to play straight away, unlike quite a few of the other guys who are going to need a little bit more time to kind of get their arms around the offense and really understand what they're doing. Daniels just feels like he could go in day one and at least perform to a reasonable level. I'm not saying he's going to be a winner straight away, but he's someone you can build your franchise around pretty quickly without having to expect there's going to be a couple of years of growing pains. Now, the issue here is while a lot of the people inside Washington do like Daniels, there's certainly a group that like Drake May, and there's a growing contingent that likes JJ McCarthy as well. So this pick could go any number of different ways. I think Daniels is the most likely, but don't be shocked if it's May or even McCarthy at the second pick. Now, the third pick is going to be the Patriots. A lot of people talking about a possible trade down here. I don't think it makes any sense at all to trade down here. The Patriots have a pretty good defense, but they've got no offense at the moment. They need to have a quarterback to build around, and most of the guys that are available here are fantastic options, but they're going to need a year or two to be ready to really perform in the NFL anyway. For that reason, I think if they take Drake May here, who I think is probably the likely option over JJ McCarthy, that means that they have a year or two to really get him ready for the offense. He is that kind of Josh Allen style guy where he's got that big arm, but he's a little bit erratic with the ball, and he's going to need a year or two to really grow into being an NFL passer. So for that reason, I think it makes sense for them to take him here and take that time rather than waiting another year and maybe having a quarterback who's not ready when the rest of the team is. At number 4, I've got them sticking and picking a wide receiver. Now, when I put this together, I had Marvin Harrison Jr. in here. I think for me, he's the number 1 pick in this draft. He's really polished. He does everything pretty well. He's one of the best prospects we've seen since the AJ Green, since the Calvin Johnsons. I'm not saying he's going to be a Calvin Johnson level player, but I'm saying that's a level of prospect we're talking about here. He's someone that's pretty close to Malik Neighbors as the top wide receiver off the board. The bookmakers have Harrison as being the heavy favorite, but Mike Jurecki is really dialed in with the Cardinals, says the Cardinals prefer Malik Neighbors. So it is possible they stick here and pick Neighbors, or that they trade back and then try to trade back up into the number 5 or 6 spot to try to pick Neighbors there after the quarterback's gone off the board. Excuse me. So I've got Harrison going here at the moment, but it easily could be Neighbors. I also think this is a spot where we could see a trade up for McCarthy. Now, with the 5th pick, there's JJ McCarthy. This is the Vikings trading up with the Chargers. I really do think the Vikings are going to trade up into the 4th or 5th spot. If it's not the Vikings, there's a good chance that either the Broncos or the Raiders do it. I don't think it really makes sense for them to do it, but they're certainly the alternative options for the people that are likely to trade up, assuming that someone does. Now, McCarthy is, for me, a tier below the top 3 passes. I don't think he's that sort of elite talent. I think he's a little bit lower down. I don't know that he fully deserves to go here, but we know that quarterbacks rise during the draft process. And McCarthy's someone that's risen a lot with the coaches specifically. The scouts don't like him a lot, but there's a lot of the coaches saying this is the guy they like. They like his personality. They like his winning mentality. They like the upsides and the intangibles that he's got. So even though his instincts are a little bit meh, I could see him at least being used as a solid game manager. We saw that in that kind of like Alex Smith style of just getting the offense to run. That's what happened in Michigan. They hardly had to use him most of the time. Most of the time, they just ran the ball over and over again and dominated with their defense and offensive line. But when it came to the big games, he was able to step up and perform. That's what the Vikings are going to be hoping for here. They've got a lot of good pass catchers, but they'll also need to improve their defense and run game so that McCarthy doesn't have to put up 30-plus points every single game to win. Now, What else could happen here? Well, look, it's not impossible that McCarthy's gone earlier and then a team's going to trade up for May. I don't think that Daniels is going to be the guy that falls. It is possible that neither team trades up, and then it will be interesting to see what the Giants do at 6. Do they take McCarthy? I think probably not, because they're kind of stuck with that Daniel Jones contract. Doesn't make sense to start your rookie contract when you're paying another quarterback a whole lot of money. You can't take advantage of that cheap quarterback. So I think that McCarthy probably goes at 4 or 5. If he doesn't, then that's going to get really interesting. Now, with the 6th pick, Giants, they need a wide receiver. They haven't had a wide receiver for ages. Okay, probably not since Odell Beckham Jr. if we really seen a true number 1 wide receiver in New York. In Malik Neighbors, they get exactly that. Neighbors is extremely fast. He's also strong. He's exactly the guy that they need to build this offense about. He's a little bit more explosive, a little bit more, I guess, special than a Marvin Harrison Jr., who's just really good at everything without having any sort of particular elite traits. Neighbors is extremely fast, but he's also explosive. There's a few things he does that just make you really go, wow. And I can imagine a situation where the Giants would jump at the opportunity to take him at 6 if he makes it to this point. It really wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't make it here. It's also not impossible that teams will be jumping over each other to try to get to this point here. So I can imagine teams offering quite a lot of picks to the Giants. For example, if the Cardinals trade back to 11, it would make sense for them to try to jump back up to 6 to try to get their preferred wide receiver. And in that case, that would give the Giants the opportunity to either have a go at Rome Odunze or alternatively build up on other assets they need, like O-linemen. I do think that Neighbors is probably the pick here. It's certainly likely to be wide receiver, but don't discount the other possibilities either. Now, this is a really good offensive line class. I personally think that Joe Alt's by far the best O-lineman in this class. He's the main guy that's a true left tackle. He's big and tall. He's a little bit stiff, but I do think that he's got the talent to be an elite offensive tackle. He's certainly a top 10 prospect in this class. There's a lot of good offensive linemen, but I think he's the only one of them that really deserves to go in the top 10. The rest just a little bit behind. A lot of them can't play left tackle, which is obviously an issue, or at least would struggle there, whereas Alt is just built for it. He was so good in his 3 or 4 years at Notre Dame. The question is, where does he go? I think Tennessee makes the most sense, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if the Chargers just stay at 5 and choose to pick him, because they do need to build the O-line. We have heard a lot from Harbaugh about the idea that he needs to build around the O-line and he can worry about the weapons later on. That's kind of what he did at Michigan, so it makes sense he'd want to do the same thing here. If he wanted to do that, Joe Alt would be the guy to build around. If he doesn't take Alt there and he slips past the Giants as well, which I think he would, that means that this would be the perfect landing spot. The Titans have built their identity around having a good O-line. However, they've kind of had a few issues with that in the last year or two, and we saw that with the drop-off in Derrick Henry's production. Now they don't have Henry anymore. They're kind of rebuilding around slightly different things. They've got Will Levis. They need to protect him as well. They need their O-line to be very strong. Joe Alt is the guy to make that happen. If he doesn't go at 5 or 6, this has got to be his floor for me. I can't see him getting past this pick. Now, 8th pick, this is where things get interesting. This feels like a trade back spot for me, but I can't work out exactly who would do it. I think it makes sense if a team trades back to 11 that they might jump up to the 8th spot to try to make sure they can get their wide receiver. So don't be surprised if you see Rome Odunze go here. Assuming the Falcons stay, though, it does certainly make sense that they take a defender. Their edge rush has been terrible for years, and every year I mock them an edge rusher, and every year they mock me by not taking one. This year, they've got to do it. The rest of the team's looking pretty strong. They've drafted strong offensive weapons the last 3 years. They got Kyle Pitts. They got Drake London. They got Bijan Robinson. They don't need more offensive players. I know they could take someone like a Brock Bowers or a Rome Odunze here, and that would make them amazing in offense, but their defense sucks. They need more pressure off the edge, and Dallas Turner is the guy that can do that. Now, he's not a special prospect, but he is clearly the best edge rusher in an edge rush class that really lacks depth. There's not a lot of quality edge rushers in this class, especially because Laiatu Latu has a lot of injury concerns, or more specifically concussion issues and neck issues, that people are concerned will make him fall and make him undraftable in the first round. That makes Dallas Turner and Jared Verse extremely valuable in this draft because there's no other players who can play that position. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if the Falcons just stay here and pick, wanting to make sure that the Bears don't take Turner off their hands at the 9 pick. Now, if it falls this way, I don't think it makes sense for the Bears to take another wide receiver. They've already got Keenan Allen to pair with DJ Moore. They've got Cole Kmet. They just brought in Gerald Everett. They've got plenty of wide receiver options, and this is a deep wide receiver class. They can easily pick one later on as well. I don't think they desperately need to go and get one. For that reason, I've got them trading down with the Chargers, who you might recall traded from 5 back to 11. They now trade up to the 9 spot to get Rome Odunze. Now, this is one of a couple of ways they could do this. When I originally made this mock, less than a week ago, I hadn't seen anyone mocking it this way with the Chargers going back then coming up. I've now seen 3 or 4 other people doing this around the place. So it does seem to be an idea that a lot of people have in their heads. But the more I think about it, the more I wonder whether it ends up being the Cardinals who do this instead. We're really just going to have to wait and see what happens. But this is the sort of idea of something that I could imagine happening. The Chargers going back, coming back up and getting that wide receiver who they can pair with Joshua Palmer and with Quentin Johnston. Odunze can be the number 1 guy. He's big, he's strong, he's great with the contested catches. He's basically what Quentin Johnston should have been, but wasn't. Johnston struggled with separation and a whole heap of other issues. He just didn't really perform to the standard expected. This will take a little bit of pressure off him. Now, wouldn't shock me either if the Chargers decide to take a tight end here. I think this is in that Brock Bowers range, and we know they just lost Gerald Everett, so they need to give Justin Herbert some weapons. This is assuming they don't take an O-lineman, of course, and it really depends on how they view the O-line class and how desperate they are to shore up that O-line first before they think about taking a player like this. This does really feel like a Rome Odunze situation, though. If he doesn't go in the 8th or 9th pick, I'd be very shocked. 10th pick, I mean, this makes so much sense. New York Jets, Brock Bowers. I mean, they have no tight ends. It's Jeremy Ruckert. It's Tyler Conklin. I mean, they're not special guys. They're not pass catchers. They're solid blockers. I like Ruckert as a blocker. He'd be a good tight end too behind Bowers, but Bowers is a game-changing weapon. This is the Aaron Rodgers win now window. They need to be giving him players to win with. I think they'd love to get a wide receiver, maybe Rome Odunze. Wouldn't surprise me if they jump up and trade with the Falcons, for example, or even the Titans to try to make sure they can get Odunze. If they don't do that, I think they'll probably just stick and pick whichever of the 2 is left. I think that's probably going to be Bowers. Now, it's also not impossible that both Bowers and Odunze are off the board here. If that happens, I think it makes sense for them to go O-lineman. The reason I don't have them going O-lineman here, even though it's a need, is that they just brought in Morgan Moses. They've already got their O-line kind of sorted for next year. That's a short-term option, but their win window is really short as well. They really only have the next year or 2 to win the Super Bowl. So bringing guys who can help you now rather than guys who are going to need a year or 2 to develop before they can truly play as a tackle. I think that would be their preferred option, but if they don't go that way, I can see a situation where they might go O-line here as well. Now, if you'd like to see more, you can go over to the Fantasy First Down YouTube channel where I go through all 32 picks. You should also head over to Razzball where I look at the fantasy impact of a lot of the expected picks. You can check me out on Twitter at Fantasy First Down with no O or on Instagram at the Fantasy First Down. I'll be back next week with another mock draft. See you later.